Hello, and thank you for watching this video on DPX vPlus Enterprise Backup and Recovery for Open VMs. vPlus provides data protection for essentially all of the other virtual environments. When it comes to the big two, VMware and Hyper-V, these have many options when it comes to data protection. Most legacy or enterprise backup solutions support VM backups and restore for VMware and Hyper-V. However, more and more organizations are beginning to take advantage of the cost effectiveness of alternative hypervisors like Nutanix Acropolis, Red Hat, Over, Citrix, and many others. The problem with most of these virtual environments, however, is that legacy backup providers do not support them. So vPlus provides that agentless backup and restore for these edge or open hypervisors. This graphic here provides a good example of the wide range of supported platforms as well as the variety of backup destinations. On the left you see Microsoft 365, but also the majority of the hypervisors that vPlus is able to protect. This is missing a few new ones. Scale Computing HC3 is one that isn't on here yet, but we are always looking to add additional hypervisors to this support matrix. As far as architecture, this is a pretty good depiction of what this looks like as well. In the middle, you have the vPlus instance. This consists of two mechanisms. The first is the vPlus server. This is the management console. It's the brains behind the operation, the IP address you use to log into the web GUI. The second is the vPlus node. The node is the data mover. During backup and restore jobs, the data resides on the node in what we call a staging space while it's moved from Microsoft 365 or the hypervisor to the backup destination on the right, or vice versa during a restore. In most cases, the node itself is deployed as a separate virtual machine, but for smaller customers, the server and node can reside on the same virtual machine. Depending on the size of the environment, say the number of VMs or the number of hosts you might have, maybe you have VMs at different data centers, for example. You can deploy additional local nodes to assist with load balancing or localizing the flow of data. And finally, on the right side of this slide, you see supported backup destinations. These backups can be stored in file systems, such as a local directory on the vPlus node, but this can also be NFS or CIFS. If you're a DPX customer already, these backups can be pointed to your existing vStore, or backups can be presented in object storage like S3 or blob storage, etc. What we're looking at here is the DPX vPlus dashboard. You'll notice we've logged into this web GUI using the IP address of the DPX vPlus server. This dashboard gives you some information around recent activity, success rate, available space in that staging location, as well as those backup destinations. Before we can get into the VM backup and restore, there's a few things that we have to do to set some configurations. The first is to define a backup destination. As I mentioned earlier, vPlus for virtual environments supports many different backup destinations, including file system, object storage, and enterprise backup software. So if you're looking to add a local file system, say an NFS share or a CIFS share, or even just a directory on the vPlus node, you can go ahead and you can create that backup destination by just clicking File System, giving this a name, and simply providing a backup destination path. This could be something as simple as a backups folder on that vPlus node. The other thing to point out here from the file system side of things is the vStore server. So if you are a DPX customer, you are using DPX for your other use cases like VMware, like Hyper-V, physical servers, OES servers, whatever that might be, you're most likely backing up data to a vStore destination. What's great about vPlus alongside DPX is that you can point your backups for these open hypervisors to that same destination. So you can continue to utilize that same single pane of glass to manage your backups, replicate to a secondary vStore, offload to tape or to object storage from that vStore. The other options around backup destination, we mentioned object storage, NES3 compatible, Google Cloud, Azure, OpenStack. We also are able to back up to other enterprise backup destinations. We talked about vStore, but we're also able to point this to Networker, Spectre Protect, Net Backup. And again, extending the support matrix for these other backup providers by pointing the backups for these previously unsupported virtual machines to that same destination. Once you have your destinations defined, you have, say, a local file system or object storage or something set up to point the backups to, the next thing is to go ahead and register our virtual environments. Now, from the Infrastructure tab, this is where we can go ahead and register our hypervisors or our hypervisor managers depending on the type of hypervisor you're using. Some of those, Nutanix Acropolis, for example, Overt, S3, they function off using a hypervisor manager. You'll notice if I go ahead to create here, you'll see AWS, you'll see HC3, as well as Nutanix Acropolis, right? Oracle VM, Overt, and Red Hat. Once you provide so let's look at say Overt, for example. Once you provide the URL for your management console, provide a username and password, what this does is kick off an inventory job of this hypervisor, identifying each of the VMs in that location and preparing them to be able to be protected. From the other side of things, a hypervisor, these are more of the standalone hypervisors, the Citrix Xen servers, KVM, Proxmox, and Xen. Again, once registered, it identifies all of the available virtual machines, and those all appear in this Instances tab. In this particular lab, we have a few different CentOS virtual machines here that are on different policies available for backup and restore. Now, if I wanted to kick off just an on-demand backup job, an ad hoc backup job of one of these VMs, say this first VM, what I can do is go over to this backup button and provide some backup job settings. Do I want this backup to be full or incremental? Do I want to start this backup job in a particular point in time? Do I want to run it immediately? If I were to kick this backup off right now, what's going to happen is this is going to pass down to this task console, and you're going to start to see a backup process run. A backup process consists of two different tasks. You'll notice that the first task is this export task, where the data is being collected from the hypervisor by the vPlus node. That data is being stored in that staging space. And then the next step in this backup process is going to be a store task, where the data is moved from that staging space to your backup destination. In this case, this is actually a Backblaze object storage destination that we're pointing towards. We'll go ahead and let that run, but to talk more about backups, this is obviously an on-demand backup job, but for the most part, if you're looking to protect these open virtual machines, you're going to want them to be protected on a regular basis. And that's where these backup SLAs come in. What the backup SLAs are, essentially defining policies and schedules for these backup jobs. The policies, we can go ahead and create a new policy here. What's great about this auto assignment rule is that we can take advantage of VM tags or utilize regular expressions to automatically manage which VMs are part of this policy. So say, for example, you have a group of VMs in your over environment that are tagged with a prod label, or they are tagged with a daily label. What you can use is just create a tag-based rule and say, hey, every virtual machine that's tagged with daily, I want to assign to my daily policy. You can also do the same thing with regular expressions. Now, the other option when it comes to defining which virtual machines will be included in this policy is simply by selecting them manually from this virtual environment section. So if I just said, hey, I want to back up this second CentOS 7 machine on a regular basis, I can select that virtual machine. I can go down to the rule section here where it's going to define the backup destination for this policy. Are we backing this up to a local file system? Are we backing this up to a vStore target, to our object storage destination? And then finally, what's the retention look like? How many days are we keeping these copies? How many copies are we keeping at that destination? And then what's the schedule look like? In this case, we have a schedule that runs every Monday and Thursday. It's going to perform incremental backups of the virtual machine that we have selected, and it's going to run those backups at 6 p.m. The schedules themselves are super easy to manage, very granular. You can simply create a new schedule, define the exact days and times you want this backup to run. You can also assign this schedule to your predefined policies as well. All right, so we've talked about both an on-demand and a scheduled backup. The next step in that case, when we already have backups available for virtual machines, is the ability to also recover from those snapshots. So looking back at that instances tab, you'll notice we again have our two virtual machines. Say, for example, something happens to this first virtual machine and I need to recover a copy of it. What I'm able to do here is go to the Restore button. I can choose from any available copy that I have for this virtual machine dependent on our retention policies. So say, for example, the object storage destination is unreachable. I want to make sure I want to recover a version from our local file system or vice versa. Maybe there was some corruption on the virtual machine on the 1st of August, and so I want to go back to an earlier point in time. This will give you the option of any available recovery points to use for this job. So say, again, let's use this version from the 29th. The next step is to define what type of restore this is going to be. Are we restoring this virtual machine back into the hypervisor? Or are we just presenting the raw files for this virtual machine to be used by developers for whatever reason? What this will do, restore to node, is mount those raw files onto the vPlus node and make them available for your team to go access. In this case, I'm going to restore to hypervisor. What's really nice about this as well is you can restore to an alternate hypervisor as long as it's like to like. You can take virtual machines from one over environment and restore it back to a different over environment. The only thing you can't do is take, say, a Citrix Zen server VM and restore it into an over environment. That destination needs to be the same hypervisor as the VM came from. There are some other options down here. You can overwrite the existing virtual machine if it already exists. You can provide a new name for that virtual machine. And obviously you can power on that virtual machine after restore. Now obviously that's also an on-demand restore job, so if it's a disaster scenario, you want to make sure you're bringing back a new copy of that corrupted virtual machine or the outage. That's where you'll go ahead and do that restore. We do have recovery plans as well, so very similar to what we were doing with our backup SLAs. You can have scheduled restores for whatever purpose that might be. Maybe it's you want to mount the latest production data set of an application that lives on one of these virtual machines into some dev environment on a daily basis or a monthly basis. What you're able to do then is schedule a recovery plan that says I want to recover this virtual machine as a new virtual machine in my staging area every week or every month, right? And that's what the recovery plans are for. Now, you'll notice we've looked at both backup and restore. There is one other button over here, and it's called a mount. What a mount allows you to do is perform file level recovery. So if I were to go ahead and perform a mounted backup, what this will do is it will let's show you here. Take one of those copies, again, that you have available. You can then mount these file systems to the local node. And what that will allow you to do is once you have that mount available, go into mounted backups. I'm not sure if we have one in this lab, but this will allow you to browse through your mounted backups, identify the files that you would like to recover, and recover them locally to your machine. That is how we would perform a single file restore in that way using mounted backups. Now, if you'd like to learn more about DPX vPlus specifically for those open virtual machines, feel free to head to catalogicsoftware.com. We have some good content there. You can also fill out some demo request forms, trial request forms. We'd be happy to provide you with more information. Thank you.